The conference room air hung thick with a scent of fresh coffee and stale ambition, the kind that clings to polished oak tables and executive egos. I sat at the far end, my fingers drumming silently on the armrest, watching as Mark strode in like he owned not just the room, but the very code that kept our servers humming. My name's Emily, and for 5 grueling years, I'd been the unseen force at TechForge, the glue in a company built on hype and half-baked ideas. I'd engineered the load balancer that averted disaster during the holiday surge, patched the database queries that prevented a $1 million outage. But recognition? That was reserved for the flashier types. The ones who could spin a pivot table into a TED-worthy revelation. Mark, our new VP of Engineering, had been here barely 6 months, yet he acted like he'd invented the cloud. Tall, with that perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a wardrobe straight out of a Silicon Valley catalog, slim-fit button-downs and sneakers that screamed, "I'm innovative but approachable." He flashed his trademark grin, the one that hit a shark's appetite, and launched into his pitch. "Ladies and gentlemen, behold TechForge Nexus, the future of our scalable architecture. This isn't just code, it's a revolution in resilience." The screen behind him lit up with diagrams, sleek lines tracing what looked suspiciously like my work. My personal work. I'd started building Nexus 2 years back, on my own time, in my cramped home office in Seattle. It began as a frustration valve, a way to escape the daily grind of TechForge's outdated stack. Their systems were a Frankenstein of legacy code and vendor lock-ins, always one glitch away from chaos. So, I dreamed bigger, a self-adaptive framework that anticipated failures, rerouted traffic seamlessly, and scaled without the drama. I registered it under my LLC, Cascade Innovations, long before Mark or anyone like him showed up. Kept it private on GitHub. No fanfare, just pure, elegant engineering that actually worked. But Mark had sniffed it out during a late-night debug session, probably while pretending to innovate on company time. He forked it quietly, rebranded it, and now here he was, parading it as TechForge Salvation. The board leaned in, eyes gleaming with dollar signs. An acquisition was on the horizon, a $200 million deal with the East Coast giant hungry for solid tech. "We've integrated it fully," Mark boasted, clicking through slides. "Ownership is airtight. This is our IP, built by our team." He glanced my way, a flicker of something, triumph, warning, in his eyes. I didn't flinch. I just sipped my water, feeling the slow burn build in my chest, like embers waiting for oxygen. After the meeting, he cornered me by the coffee machine, his voice dropping to that faux confidential tone. "Emily, great stuff with Nexus. But hey, just a heads up, legal's tightening up IP docs. Standard stuff. You know, anything developed while you're here. Well, it's family property." He clapped my shoulder like we were buddies, but his grip lingered a second too long. Possessive. I nodded, murmuring, "Sure, Mark. I'll look it over." Inside, my mind raced. He thought he could waltz in and claim what I'd poured my soul into? No. I'd seen this play before. Quiet contributors like me get steamrolled while the loud ones climb. But I wasn't quiet out of weakness. I was strategic. That night, rain pattering against my window, I pulled out my original employment contract from a locked drawer. TechForge's IP clause was broad but had a loophole, exemptions for pre-existing entities. Cascade Innovations predated my hire by a year, with ironclad timestamps. Mark's update was a slick revision, bearing a retroactive claim in fine print. I printed both versions, swapped the key pages with the old exemptions, signed it with the same blue ink pen from my first freelance gig. Clean. Untraceable. Handed it back the next day with a smile. All good. He didn't even skim it. Just filed it away. Too busy plotting his ascent. Weeks blurred into a tense rhythm. Mark pushed Nexus, my Nexus, into production, masking TechForge's flaws. Demos ran flawlessly. Thanks to the hidden safeguards I'd embedded, a licensing validator that pinged ownership metadata. If anyone tampered with control, it would trigger a soft lockdown. Not destructive. Just uncooperative. Latency spikes. Frozen queues. Until verified. Mark bragged in all-hands meetings, calling it our breakthrough. Colleagues shot me sympathetic looks. But no one spoke up. Fear of rocking the boat. I guess. The acquisition loomed. Due diligence teams sniffing around. I waited. Heart steady. Knowing the storm was brewing. One evening, as fog rolled in off Puget Sound, my phone buzzed. An alert from my monitoring script. Ownership metadata altered. License query initiated. TechForge had filed an internal transfer, absorbing Cascade into their umbrella without a whisper to me. Mark stewing. No doubt. The embers ignited. I didn't act rashly. Just watched as the system responded per design. Access revoked subtly. Services degrading. By morning, Slack exploded with alerts. Mark messaged me, "Hey, minor glitch in Nexus. Can you hop on?" I replied calmly, "On it." But I wasn't fixing their theft. The tension coiled tighter, ready to snap. The office buzzed with that artificial calm before a deadline, keyboards clacking like distant thunder. I arrived early, badge swiping me into the glass-walled fortress of TechForge. Mark was already there, pacing his corner office, phone glued to his ear. "No." It stabilized. Just a config tweak. His voice carried through the thin walls. Laced with that edge of panic, he tried to bury under bravado. The acquisition team was due in hours for a deep dive. And Nexus was faltering, queues backing up, endpoints timing out. My design, at work, enforcing boundaries he thought he could ignore. I settled at my desk, pulling up logs on my personal laptop, hidden behind the company monitor. The kill switch had engaged flawlessly, a cascade of checks failing due to the tampered ownership flag. It wasn't malice, it was protection. I'd coded it that way after hearing horror stories from dev friends, ideas poached, credit erased. Cascade was mine, born from sleepless nights and a refusal to let corporate greed dim my spark. Mark burst out of his office. "Spotting me." "Emily, need you in the war room." "Now." His tie was askew, eyes wild. I followed, pulse even, as we entered a room crammed with engineers. Whiteboards scrawled with frantic diagrams. "What's the status?" he barked, ignoring the team's exhausted faces. One dev, Jake, rubbed his temples. "Retries are failing across the board. It's like the core's rejecting our keys." Mark shot me a look, expectant. "You built this, fix it." The room went quiet. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I licensed it. Through my LLC." "You changed that without asking." Gasps rippled. Mark's face reddened. "That's internal. We own it now." He waved a hand, dismissing, but doubt flickered in his eyes. The build-up was palpable, pressure mounting like a storm front. As the morning dragged, the acquisition auditors arrived, sharp-suited pros from New York, clipboards and laptops at the ready. They didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Show us the IP chain for Nexus," their lead, a no-nonsense woman named Laura, demanded. Mark presented his polished deck, but she waved it off. Docs, not slides. Legal scrambled, handing over the updated contract I doctored. I sat silently, watching Laura's brow furrow as she cross-referenced. "This references a pre-existing LLC. Cascade Innovations. Mark stammered.
That's resolved. Absorbed.
Laura's team dug deeper, pulling repo histories, commit logs. My timestamps shone like beacons, first lines written pre-TechForge. Under Cascade. The room grew hotter, whispers turning to murmurs. Mark tried deflection. Look, it's operational. We've invested in integrations. But Laura pinned him. Operational? Our tests show degradation. And this license clause, void on unauthorized transfer. The explosion neared. I could feel it in the tightening air. Mark's voice rose. Emily, confirm it's ours. All eyes on me. I met his gaze. Voice steady. It's not. And now it's locked. Chaos erupted. The CEO, who'd been lurking on speakerphone, roared in. What the hell? Mark pointed at me. She sabotaged it. No, I countered, pulling out my folder, original docs. Logs. Everything. You stole it. Laura nodded. Impressed. This invalidates the core asset. We're pausing diligence. Mark deflated. The room spinning into damage control. Calls flew. Fingers pointed. But I stood firm. The quiet engineer, no more. The tension released in waves, leaving wreckage. TechForge's facade cracked, and the real storm was just beginning. That afternoon, as rain lashed the windows, I walked out for lunch, but really to breathe. My phone pinged, client complaints flooding in downtimes. Lost data. Mark's empire teetered. Back in the office, he pulled me aside, desperation cracking his polish. Emily, we can negotiate. Equity. Promotion, whatever. His eyes pleaded. But I saw the opportunist beneath. Too late, I said softly. You crossed the line. He stormed off. But the damage was done. The build-up had peaked. Now came the fallout. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in jagged stripes, casting shadows across the disheveled conference table littered with half-empty coffee cups and crumpled notes. The acquisition meeting had devolved into a battlefield, with Laura's team dissecting every flaw in TechForge's claims. Mark sat rigid, his earlier confidence shattered, as the CEO paced like a caged animal. Fix this.
Mark. Now.
But there was no quick fix. My licensing safeguard had turned Nexus into a fortress, inaccessible without my consent. I'd built it that way, resilient against threats, including internal ones. Flashback to how it started. I joined TechForge fresh from a startup burnout, drawn by promises of impact. But impact meant invisibility for folks like me. I fixed bugs at midnight, optimized queries while others golfed with VPs. Frustration festered, birthing Cascade. Nights in my apartment, code flowing like therapy, creating something pure. When Mark arrived, he disrupted the fragile balance, endless meetings on velocity, ignoring the rot beneath. He spotted my repo during a shared debug, eyes lighting up like he'd struck gold. Instead of collaborating, he schemed. Now. In the room, Laura laid it bare. The metadata shows this predates employment. Attempted absorption triggered the clause. Mark exploded. That's absurd. She developed it here. Lies piled on lies. But evidence didn't bend. I interjected calmly. Check the timestamps. My LLC owns it. The CEO turned to me, fury mixed with realization. Why didn't you say something? I did, I replied. In the code. The air crackled, emotions boiling over. Mark's face twisted in betrayal, as if I owed him my genius. The meeting adjourned in disarray. Auditors packing up with skeptical glances. Mark cornered the CEO in the hall, whispering frantically, but the damage rippled outward. Stock whispers tanked internal morale. Devs messaged me privately. You legend. But it wasn't about heroics, it was justice. That evening, alone in my home office, I monitored the fallout. TechForge systems limped on fallbacks I'd long outgrown. Mark's emails begged, "Let's talk terms." I ignored them, letting silence speak. The next day brought escalation. Board calls, legal threats. Mark painted me as disloyal. But my docs held firm, Washington state law-backed LLC protections. The tension rebuilt, slower now, as reality sank in.
Client belled.
Citing instability. The $200 million deal evaporated in a press release. Parties mutually agreed to halt proceedings due to unresolved technical issues. Mark's name was mud. Rumors of his firing circulated. I felt a quiet vindication, but also the weight of years undervalued, now avenged through intellect, not rage. As weeks passed, TechForge scrambled. Layoffs loomed, budgets slashed. I resigned quietly, cascade intact. Mark's downfall was poetic, the self-proclaimed visionary undone by overlooking the builder. The story's core pulsed. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. We hold the keys. Twilight settled over the city, streetlights flickering to life as I drove home. The hum of traffic a distant roar. Inside TechForge, the aftershocks continued. Mark's office stood empty, his belongings boxed by HR. The CEO had canned him that morning. A terse email announcing leadership changes. Whispers filled the halls. He tried to steal her IP. Satisfaction bloomed in my chest, warm and earned. But it wasn't glee, it was closure. The release after years of bottled frustration. Reflecting back, Mark's arrogance had been his undoing. He'd waltzed in with MBAs and mantras, dismissing the grind. "We're disrupting," he'd say, while I debugged his disruptions. My nexus was the antithesis, efficient,
Honest.
when he claimed it, embedding it without credit. I let him dig his grave. The doctored contract was my shield, the kill switch, my sword. Legal battles loomed. But my evidence was bulletproof, affidavits, server logs, even emails where I'd declined integration offers. Post-firing, TechForge sued half-heartedly, claiming breach. But courts favored creators. A judge dismissed swiftly, citing clear ownership. The media caught wind. Tech giants' deal derails over stolen code. Anonymous tips, mine, fueled the fire. Mark's LinkedIn went dark. His visionary posts mocked. He landed a lesser gig, but the stain lingered. Meanwhile, Cascade thrived. I partnered with a boutique firm in Austin. True collaborators who valued input. Our joint release soared. Reviews praising the unmatched stability. Yet, the human cost lingered. Colleagues I'd liked suffered layoffs. Guilt tugged. But they understood corporate theft demanded response. The story's rhythm slowed here. Emotions settling into reflection. What drives us to build? Only to have it snatched? Ambition's dark side. Perhaps. Mark learned humility the hard way. The power of patience. In quiet moments, I'd ponder. Was it revenge or self-preservation? The line blurred, leaving a haunting echo. Trust, once broken, rebuild slowly, if at all. Moonlight spilled across my new office in a converted loft. Screens glowing with fresh code. Cascade had evolved, partnerships blooming into a modest empire. TechForge?
Accoscionare tal.
Acquired cheaply by a vulture fund, stripped for parts. Mark faded into obscurity. A footnote in tech forums, the guy who tanked a unicorn over ego. I didn't gloat. Life moved on. But the core lingered. In America's cutthroat tech world, where ideas are currency, ownership is sacred. Underappreciated talents like me were the backbone, yet often erased. My stand wasn't just personal, it echoed for every engineer sidelined. The narrative's climax had passed, but the moral question hung. When does protection become punishment? Did Mark deserve total ruin? Or was a lesson enough? Society's ma choose the ambitious, but spares the cunning. As I coded into the night, a soft peace settled. No more whispers of theft, just creation, pure and mine. The story ends not with triumph's bang, but a thoughtful pause. What lines would you draw to protect your spark?